Welcome to the Spoiler Room 8 Weeks of Alfred Hitchcock. The next 8 episodes, we will be covering some films that are known and not so known of Alfred Hitchcock's. We hope you enjoy the show and aren't too scared. If you do get scared, please pause the podcast, have a drink, come back and finish the podcast. Thank you and enjoy.
Yes, and welcome, my friends out there, to the Spoiler Room. Thanks for joining us once again as we're doing our 8 weeks of Hitchcock. We are halfway through. This is our 4th episode in our 8 weeks, and I've got a great crew member joining me tonight to talk about an interesting film directed by Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. We're talking about The Man Who Knew Too Much, and we're going to discuss both the 56 one and also the 1934 version, both directed by Alfred Hitchcock. So, Scotty D, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing there, Mark?
We're hanging in there. We're getting by. So, yeah, Alfred Hitchcock, The Man Who Knew Too Much. Now, interesting enough, you could probably give the same synopsis for both versions. For the most part, I mean, some gender changes and such, but did you want to give the synopsis?
All right, for the 56 version, sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, the film opens and you have a typical American couple, kind of a white upper middle class, actually rich. We'll just say they're rich.
They're rich.
They're rich because no one can afford that they do. But it's an American family. The husband is a doctor. The wife was a celebrated star of the Broadway stage, who is now a stay-at-home mom because she got married, and this is the 50s. And the husband being a doctor is more important than the wife being an international star. So they boy, I mean, it's not even hard to miss these days, guys. You see these movies. But so anyway, but there's this white from a class family, very pleasant people though, all besides, and they're vacationing in Morocco. It's a husband, a wife, and their little boy, who is annoying as hell, and I will get to him. And they're vacationing. They meet this person on the train, who they immediately strike up a friendship with. But then they start to suspect kind of strange things about this person, and when and their suspicions are confirmed when this person they meet is murdered and slips some information to the husband, who is about to give it to police and is then informed that his son has been kidnapped and that if he gives any information to the authorities, his son is going to be killed. So, not feeling like they can do anything with the authorities, they try their best to locate their son, not knowing who's kidnapped him or why, and they try to basically find him before something even worse happens to their kid. So yeah, that's about it. But I am verbally challenged tonight, apparently. This is the man who knew too much. I am the man who knows just barely enough to be allowed to live on my own without constant supervision. So I mean, it's not a very productive day in Scotty land here. So
Boy, I don't know if that would all fit on the marquee there.
Well, you'd have to be a reader, and if you're somebody like how I'm feeling tonight, it might take you a good hour to read that. It's like, are you loitering? I'm just reading. I now have to start over.
Once again, we have Alfred Hitchcock pairing up with Mr. Jimmy Stewart. So and Doris Day's in this. Wow. Doris Day this time is with Mr. Jimmy Stewart. She plays the wife. They play the happy couple and such. And go figure, she plays a Broadway star. Because when you have Doris Day in your movie, you need to have her sing. I think that's like a law of the land. Which I'm not complaining because it's Doris Day. And for those who pay attention to classics, this is where Que Sera Sera came from. That actually, I believe, got nominated for an Oscar, didn't it? The song, I believe, did, which she originally didn't want to do. Yeah, Best Original Song. It actually won the Oscar for Best Original Song.
Yep, and it was a big, huge hit. Made the I think it reached number. I'm actually doing some little internet reading right now, and it reached number 2 on the U.S. charts, pop charts, and number 1 in the U.K.
Oh, there you go. So yes, we have Doris Day in here opposite Jimmy Stewart, and they play off each other well as a couple. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was the first thing that kind of stuck out with me with this couple. I mean, they're a couple. You feel like they're a couple. These are two excellent actors. So as far as chemistry between these two, you feel it. But yeah, it always made me wonder. I'm like, she's an international star, but she used to be about 4 years ago. How old is the kid? Oh, wait, he's a doctor in Indiana.
Yeah, he wants, and I don't care if you're the best doctor in the state. You know, it's like, and they make notes about that the husband's money is paying for the trip.
Yeah,
I'm not saying like, oh, so and so's pancreas paid for this, and I guess that trip over that we took last year, those were the twins that were born, and I just kept on waiting for her to think, or I just kept on waiting for Doris to turn around and says like, yeah, it could be that, or it could be my 3 consecutive Tonys. You know, I mean.
Yeah, I'm like, Indianapolis, even for back then, I'm like, I don't think we're working off of your money, dude.
It's a very
telling people you are, but I mean, they stay at the best hotel. The hotel room they stay at in Marrakesh is like this ultimate suite.
It's opulent. It's very, it's a very nice, they're very nice digs. They're the type of American couple where when they go abroad, everybody tries to mob them for money because they know that they've got it. It's not a couple of students backpacking through and staying in hostels. I mean, they're well off.
they are, and then when their trip, their search, their journey, they figure their kids some kind of way. They draw a line saying, "Oh, the kid's gonna be in London. Let's go check there." And they go to London. Their room's even bigger there. It's like, Christ.
Yeah, they were slumming in Marrakesh.
Yeah. It felt like it, that they were slumming in Marrakesh. Though I did like this first part with the Marrakesh because it felt like Alfred was trying to give you a little insight into their culture, and not necessarily in a bad way that you might expect from the 50s. You know, I mean, they cover in the beginning where the kid falls and accidentally grabs the scarf of off the woman's face, and he explains about the Muslim culture, about how the Muslim culture, there are very little accidents.
Yeah, and
like, ooh,
it was interesting how they did it. Now you got to understand that any movie, especially from this era, is going to have this this kind of worldview, whether if it comes from Britain or America, because in those two countries especially, how they approach any foreign land, and in this one they even still call it, Africa, the dark continent, and everything.
Yeah, the kid, they have that conversation with the kid.
Well, I mean, that's what it was always. I was called that a lot. It was called that a lot in a lot of the literature. Virtually every movie that touched on the continent, it was the dark continent, and that's one of the things they used. But from the worldview of anybody in America or the United Kingdom, they have the unique thing of, this is the worldview of that is colonial.
Yeah, colonialism.
We have, it's originally was England, who went in and colonized the world. They would get in there, and sometimes they would incorporate into other cultures. Most often, they would just kind of sweep the cultures aside or whatever. And then, of course, once the after World War, and of course in the once America got going, they said, that sounds like a good idea, and they decided to do that too. And so it's not a very pleasant thing to look at, but it is something that is unique to those two countries, and that's gonna be the approach that any of those two countries takes to foreign lands, especially in a film that was made in the 50s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it takes an interesting approach. But in this one, like I said, I felt like at least they were trying, even if part of it was a little bit humorous, like in the meal when I just keep calling him Jimmy Stewart. I did that with Rear Window too. Benjamin.
Yeah, I just kept on calling him the husband, because I knew I would be constantly saying Dr. Jimmy Stewart or anything like that, or
Benjamin McKenna and his wife Josephine, or Joe McKenna. Benjamin and Joe are invited by this guy they just met on the bus, who helped keep their kid from being killed by the Muslim husband, whose wife scarf the kid accidentally pulled off and then didn't give the scarf back. Kid, he just held on to it. I'm like, dude,
you get at least,
dude, drop it or something. How do you not notice what you just did? But so they just meet this guy in the bus, and then they decide, oh, well, let's have drinks. Well, sure, we'll go to dinner. And I'm like, you just met this dude on a bus in Marrakesh. Have you not heard the songs? Have you not read the books?
A lot of Hitchcock's things go into this, though, where people would just meet on trains. I don't know. I always wonder, and I see this in other movies too. I always wonder if travel used to be a lot different, where people would meet and strike up friendships on trains and stuff like that. There's that in other Hitchcock films. There's it's something that happened in a Gaslight, which I watched just recently.
Yeah, Gaslight.
Great movie. That happens in there. I often wonder if that's just what used to happen. You might meet somebody that, I just was on a plane. You didn't, I went out of my way not to talk to anybody for the 3-hour flight. So
see, and I'm kind of the opposite way, which is funny because my wife is a little more introvert, but I'm that guy who will be standing in line, and if I notice other people are uncomfortable with standing in line and then someone says something that I know about or something, I'll chuckle and nod, and suddenly we're in a conversation because I'm that guy. I
envy that. I'm a little too despite how much I talk a lot because I am comfortable talking with the people who co-host these shows, and generally if you get me in person, I tend to slip back into my shell quite a bit, so I can be a little shy when you first meet me in real life.
Yeah, so Jill gets a kick out of it because she's she gets together with people and stuff too, but she's a little more introvert than that. But me, I'm that guy, and I fully recognize it. So these people, back then, you're right, though, travel is a little bit different. They have a little bit of different perspective. But it's still, from today's perspective, a little odd when you see them not only just meet this guy on a bus to Marrakesh, and they decide to have dinner and drinks with the guy. Of course, he stands them up, which they didn't like, but they leave. They meet this other British couple, the Draytons, who they regret later why, after they met them, but they meet the Draytons and they just leave their kid with him.
This is why there are a lot. This is why there are a lot of people in therapy remembering remembering really horrible things in their past now as they're parents would just leave them with like randos that they met.
They sat there, and, at first they mentioned something in the hotel in dinner when they just meet the Draytons. Before that, they get the hotel to just get them a rando babysitter for their kid. Again, we're in Marrakesh. It's just a different perspective, and maybe it's because they're just 10 years fresh out of the war at this point, a little bit more, so maybe the thought of safety or whatnot was different. But I mean, you look at this now and I'm just like, man, I wouldn't want some random babysitter for the hotel there. And then, we met the Draytons last night here, Billy, go on and run off with Mrs. Drayton while we go stare at the acrobats.
Right. And once the kid is eventually kidnapped, you're almost surprised that they take it so hard.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, someone finally took him. Oh my God. Honestly, the kid is annoying as hell. So I was like, yeah, I'd be doing I'd be doing whatever I could to like pawn this kid off on somebody. They were in a marketplace. That kid could have gotten lost easy or traded for something.
They had the sewing machines right there in the street. He could have just sat him down at one and had him start making clothes and run away. Here, Burley, look at the Hank. Look at the snake charmer. Look at the snake charmer here. And I'm assuming they would put one in this movie because whether they were in Marrakesh or not, it's a cliche, and they were all about cliches. Well, they didn't actually have the snake charmer though.
They should have had one. They should have had one in there, to make the thing complete. Like watch the snake charmer. Poke it with a stick. Poke it with a stick. I'll pretend that I'm not a doctor. And I don't know what to do. Yeah.
That's it. Now the rest of the show, we're just going to do a Jimmy Stewart.
We're going to have dueling Jimmy Stewart impressions.
Dueling Jimmy Stewart.
We should just do that for like every podcast we do. We should have done that for the Astro Radio Z porn parody episode.
Oh, we should have. That would have made that.
It's like I can't believe you cut out the oral.
Anal I could see, but why the oral? Like doing banjos. No, but yeah, it's just, you can tell from it being a different time period. This is just, it's odd to watch. And then, but yeah, you're right. When we find out the Draytons were the ones behind kidnapping the kid. I am not surprised by this, but by God, Dr. Benjamin McKenna and his wife Jo seem really surprised at the strangers that they left their kid with. Suddenly their kid's kidnapped, and they get because Mr. Bernard, we find out later, is actually a secret agent, man. And he gives old Jimmy Stewart the information about an assassination. Which that's what really screws everything up for these two. It should surprise them though that the kid got taken, leaving it with strangers. Though I do like the story that they had with the Bernard scene to see, because he's supposed to be posing as an Arab, so he was supposed to have face makeup on.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently the actor himself had darker skin. And no matter what they could do with the makeup, they couldn't make it look paler when Jimmy Stewart ran his hands along the guy's face. So they did the opposite. They had the whiter paint on Jimmy Stewart's fingers. And they had him... So when he grabs the guy's face, he's actually putting the makeup on, not rubbing it off.
Interesting.
Yeah, I read that little trivia tidbit. I thought that was interesting that they couldn't get the makeup the one way, so Jimmy had to do it the old school way of having it on his fingers. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, old Bernard gets killed, gives the assassination information. So our couple head to London looking for their kid, knowing this assassination's happened. And this is it's got the common theme set up as the 1939 one. But this film is definitely longer than that one.
Oh yeah.
But they do hit on some of the key similar scenes in here, like the interrogation, because old Benjamin and Joe get put under interrogation by the Marrakesh police, and in the 39 one they were in the Swiss, so Swiss Alps. So it was the Swiss police giving that couple the interrogation. They were kind of similar the way they play out, but I kind of liked how the one in the actually I liked almost everything about the 56 version a little bit better than the 39 version in it. But here we've got similar theme going on of the what is the value of the life of the kid versus the value of the life of the guy who's going to get assassinated. That's the same thing that runs through both these films. And I thought it was very interesting how they handled that in both. What'd you think about that theme that they had of the life of a kid versus the life of a diplomat? I mean,
it was kind of interesting, but because you don't know this is a very personal thing, this the life of this child here. In comparison, though, the life of this other person could affect the lives of so many other people. In neither film, now, and if that sounds vague, it's because that in neither film do they really tell us anything about the villains or anything. The diplomat and the villains themselves, in many ways, are a MacGuffin themselves.
Yeah,
which Hitchcock loves. We don't know if, when I was watching the 34 version, I was like, we don't know. I'm like, okay, are these guys fascists? Are they communists? Are they anarchists? I didn't know. And in the 56 version, you don't know either. You just know they're up to no good. It's like they just know they want this person dead. They're up to no good. That's all you really need to know. And so you don't know exactly how it's going to affect, but you can kind of take the film's word for it. That yes, if this person were to be harmed, it would it might affect more people than if this child were killed. But then again, how do you sacrifice the life of any child, much less your own? That's not even a consideration that you could do such a thing. So.
Yeah, and you're right. I'm glad you mentioned it because I thought I had missed something in both versions. I'm like, they don't mention what country. I mean, in the 56 version, we get kind of a obscure view of a plaque that says something embassy, but you're not quite sure what. It's these nondescript foreign diplomats in both cases that are going to get assassinated, but you really don't know what country. I don't think it's ever really identified what country they're in or from or who the bad guys were. I mean, it's Peter Lorre in the 39 version, so whatever role he had. I mean, in the 34 version, he's the bad guy. It's like,
and that's something that I will say. You said you liked pretty much everything more in the 56 version. I'm going to say that there are some things I like more in the 56 and some things I like more in the 34. One of those things is that the 56 version does not have a central villain. And Peter Lorre is unforgettable as a central villain in the original. He was fantastic.
Yeah, you're absolutely right in that. Yeah, in the 50s in the 50s version, you had a body of villains, but you didn't really have a specific one. And I love Peter Lorre, and he was great. I mean, he played the role a lot straighter than I expected.
He learned his lines phonetically.
Oh, did he really?
He learned. This was very soon after he had fled Nazi Germany.
Okay.
He was one of the very many people who he did not leave voluntarily. He fled Nazi Germany because he saw that this was just getting worse and worse. And just like just like his favorite director, Fritz Lang, he left Germany, and he still barely spoke any English. So he actually learned his lines phonetically for this film, which is even
Wow.
more impressive because he is so good. He's very good. He is the heavy in this movie. And that's the thing is that, Peter Lorre, he's like this little short guy. I mean, you can imagine that he'd be pretty easy to take for just about anybody to take down.
Yeah.
I mean, if you remember his role in Casablanca, I mean, he doesn't seem like he would be that hard to take down. And that was a role that really pretty much got that right. But it's how he carries himself. He doesn't have to be big. He doesn't have to be stocky. He doesn't even have to be creepy or anything like that. He just has to have this certain air about him that says, like, no, I'll tell you how things are going to go. And he's very, very authoritative. And now everybody's taking orders from this little guy because this little guy, you just know he's going to mess you up. He's a very chilling bad guy in that movie.
He is in the 30s version of this film. He is a memorable character in this, and a far more memorable villain than in the 50s version, because we mentioned the Draytons, who you find out are working for someone within the embassy who wants their own prime minister killed in the 50s version, and the Draytons are played a little bit more sympathetically in this. They're kind of like, almost felt like a little bit like the reluctant couple, especially when there's talk of actually killing the kid rather than letting him get out of the embassy. There's something you notice they seem to have a little bit of remorse. There's none of that with the 30s villains.
No.
Well, a little hint, but maybe it's because Alfred Hitchcock, it's an earlier one of his films and he was still refining his technique in it. You do get a little bit of sympathy from one of the characters, but it's not nearly as evident as it is in the 50s version. It's like more pronounced. I don't know. Did you get that there was at least a little bit in there? Because there is a little bit in it in the 30s version, I think. But
you get the idea in the end that these aren't people that are just like evil for the sake of evil or anything. They have a code. They have things that they believe in. And towards the end of the movie, their desperation becomes more and more and more apparent. And so you can kind of feel for them as people. But at the same time, their acts were just monstrous.
yeah.
So you still can't sympathize with them too much. So, yeah.
No, you can't. And that's one of the differences between the 39 and 50s version as well, is the bad guys, especially because in the earlier version, the assassin, and we're going to get to the really cool theater scene. I want to talk about that. But before that, the difference between them, I know we're jumping around a little bit, is in the 50s version, the assassin dies.
Mm-hmm.
In the 30s version, he escapes and he gets back with our boss, and he's the one that's ready to just kill the kid, who is a girl in the 30s version, I thought, and older.
Mm-hmm. Slightly older, and certainly less of a
annoyance. No, just kidding.
Yes, I was trying to be nice about it. Certainly less of a little squealing brat. Yeah, so I can't be nice. Why didn't you just let him go, Jimmy?
Do you think that's Alfred because of the changes? Because that's one of the big changes is the kid. It's a daughter instead of a son, and she's a little older than the son was in the we'll say the American version, the 50s version. Do you think he changed it to add an extra level of maybe threat feeling? Because in the 30s version, she was older, and while she was still a kid and vulnerable, she was portrayed a little bit tougher than the little boy. Is it that, right? Or maybe it's a cultural? Is it a cultural?
I would say you're right there, and I think you're also touching on something, and which is, and this is how I feel about the 56 version of this film, which I'd seen a number of times before rewatching it for the show, is that Man Who Knew Too Much is perhaps the greatest example of a Steven Spielberg movie made before Steven Spielberg started making movies.
Nice, yeah.
Is that the remake rather of The Man Who Knew Too Much? It has so many elements where, okay, just like Spielberg did, he was somebody who everybody knew was a talented filmmaker, but he had also basically created a type of filmmaking of his own that everybody then tried to copy, and because of that, he was often dismissed until much later when it became evident that no, everybody really respects him, and but at the same time, he would play to the audience. He didn't make a movie that said like where he said, well, maybe only 2 or 3 people will get it, but he was playing to mass audience, and that is never more evident than in The Man Who Knew Too Much. So he has the kid that's in danger, and he makes it so that everybody who's going to see this film can relate to that, because these movies didn't used to be just things that younger people went to. It used to be things that couples went to, and married couples went to, and married couples would sometimes leave their kids home with the rando babysitters and go to the movies and everything. And it's something they can all relate to. There's a lot more playing around with little tight touches of humor. There's a lot more. They throw in some exotic locales. I think that was done for 2 reasons. I think it was done, one, to compete against television, show them something they can't see on the tube, and also it was done to give it an extra little flair. He's doing that. He's got all these other little set pieces. He has a damn pop song as the conclusion of the movie, which I'm sure we're going to get to eventually here. I mean, this film could not be more obviously playing to the audience, and I think that this is one of those ones where he really knew what his audience wanted and he was playing to it. I don't think it's quite as successful as, say, North by Northwest, which I think would be probably his best example of this, where it's just like a pure thrill ride from beginning to end. But but nevertheless, I think that's what he's going for. And I think that I always saw a lot of similarities between the approach Hitchcock had in this film and the approach that, say, Spielberg did in his later films, when he showed all these families in peril with exotic locales and strange occurrences and such.
Jurassic Park.
Or any other movie, basically. Hell, he turned War of the Worlds into that,
I know, right? And yeah, you're this one. It is playing a little bit more to it. I mean, the couple. What's funny is the couple in the '50s version, Jimmy Stewart, Doris Day, love them, great actors. They do wonderful in the film. Don't get me wrong. They feel like a little bit more of. I mean, it's also 20 years difference. Their couple relationship is a bit different than the one in the 39, only in the fact that it sounds, or it's 34, it sounds weird, but in the 34 version, I believe I felt like that couple, Bob and Jill Lawrence, were more equals than in the 50s version. Didn't you? Because I mean, you had in the 30s version, you've got Bob Lawrence, who was played by Leslie Banks, and Edna Best played Jill Lawrence. Those two, they're in the Alps. One guy's skiing, or he's at skiing actually. His wife is a skeet shooter. And she's actually competing there. And she gets thrown off by Peter Lorre's watch and her kid, who's bugging her. But the dynamic between those two, it just felt, I don't know, it felt a little bit more equal in the 30s version versus the 50s version. While Doris Day is still a strong female character, is that just me, or does it just feel like the dynamic was just a little bit more equal in the earlier version?
The 50s things got more conservative than they were perhaps before. Let's not forget, you were mentioned the war before.
Yeah.
let's not forget what happened to both countries during the war. And Britain had an even longer. I bring up Britain a lot because Alfred Hitchcock is an English director who emigrated to America, so he's had his foot on both sides of the pond, and what happened is that they were involved in a very, very serious war for a long time, at which point it was up to everybody, regardless of gender, to pull their own weight. In the case of a lot of these places, women started working in factories. They started building things. They started actually having careers and things of their own, and really settling up. When the war was over, they were expected to just give all that up.
Yeah.
And to just go back to the way things were. And I think there was a lot of relief, and so everybody's just happy, everybody's home and safe, so that a lot of them did it. And then I think there was initially a bit of resistance to that. And so I think that in the 50s especially, there was this conservative resurgence of American values and traditional values. And so that's why I think a lot of people talk about like these types of things as the 50s, as if they had not existed for the decades before as well. It's not just because in the 60s things started to blow up. It's because they actually got worse than ever. I mean, that's one thing that happened. You'll hear a lot of kids today talk about 80s nostalgia. Guys, it wasn't that great. And things got a lot more conservative. People started experimenting with things in the 60s, which started to kind of get a bit bizarre in the 70s, and by the 80s, it was very self-centered and a lot more conservative, and suddenly it wasn't quite as cool to talk about women's rights or the rights of basically any oppressed class or citizen. It suddenly was not patriotic.
Yeah.
So I think we're dealing with before I get too far off the point here, I think we're dealing with that here too. That's why it seems that this movie was made, gosh, what was it, 22 years later, the remake. And yet it's some of the ideals seem more stodgy and conservative. Now, the lead in the 34 version, he's a big nothing. I mean, he's nowhere near as charismatic as Jimmy Stewart is. Jimmy Stewart brings his own unique charm to whatever role he plays, whether it's comedy, drama, whatever. Let's look at this relationship between the two people. I mean, in the end of the movie, Doris Day sings a song. The wife in the original shot a son of a bitch.
Yeah, right. That got me. I'm watching the original.
She's like a sniper.
I'm watching the original, and here the husband gets kidnapped. He can't really fight his way out. He ends up getting shot at one point. The daughter's on the roof or whatnot with the assassin in the big climax. The mom shows up in the 34 version, looks up, goes, huh. And the one cop is like, oh, I can't shoot him. I might hit her. And the mom's looking. She just grabs the rifle. Bang! And the assassin falls off the roof. And then, there she is, old Jill Lawrence, and the best, holding the smoking rifle. And she just goes, oh, here.
You want it? It's like, you want to get something done, give it to the woman.
I loved that, but it was such a surprise watching that version, after watching the 50s version. Like, wow, that's...
Oh, you watched the original after the original?
Yes, because I wanted to, the 56 one, the 54 50s one was a lot more popular than, it talked about more than the 30s one. So I wanted to watch that one first and then go back and watch the original and see, what was pulled from it. And I did like that ending.
Oh, I hate the ending of the 56. It's
Yeah.
one of the only things. It's one of the few things that I do have against the 56. One is I don't like the art direction. I think the 56 version is kind of an ugly looking film. The
Hmm.
way the color is processed and everything, and the black and white on the in the original is, oh, it's beautiful,
It
folks.
is. Oh,
Uh, and and it's a very artsy done movie. Um, but this I tell you,
50s version.
this is the 56 version. I hate this ending. It's this sappy thing where she sings this popular song is gonna be on all the hit charts, and then this kid just starts whining and whistling, and
And then the dad finds
it's
them, and then the assassin.
so
Yeah.
saccharine and convenient. I just didn't like it at all. I never liked that. It always, even when I first saw this movie, I never much liked it.
You
So
you mentioned the word absurd, and in this case, it is actually fitting with the ending of this film because, and this is after, and like I said, we're jumping around a little bit, folks. We will talk about the concert scene, but this is after, basically events happened to where our doctor and his wife were able to get invited to the embassy where they figure their kid is being held. And yeah, she does this thing where they talk about she sings beautifully, but she's trying to sing loud enough so that the kid can hear her, who's 3 stories up. First off, and she's
yeah,
singing, and
she's used to projecting from the stage.
she is, but still, and then yeah, you're right. Jimmy Stewart nonchalantly in an embassy manages to sneak away, grab the kid. Assassin shows up, decides that he's going to make an escape by using the dad and kid as shield. And in what's probably the weakest moment in history of film, not quite but close to how to dispatch the main villain. At one point, Jimmy just pulls his kid away and pushes the guy down the stairs.
Yeah.
I mean, not even like a real hefty push. He just kind of like, and the guy rolls down. And, I'm glad I don't fall down stairs in movies because people's necks seem to break real easy while rolling downstairs in movies.
They're made out of like balsa wood. The it's funny, the last episode I was on with you was one of the other Hitchcock episodes. It was Notorious,
Yes.
and both films end with a perilous trip down the stairs.
Yes.
And Notorious handled it much better. We'll just say that.
This almost felt like they weren't quite sure where they wanted to go with the ending of this one. I mean,
this almost seems like this isn't the case because Hitchcock planned everything.
Oh, sure.
So meticulously, but it almost seems like something you would hear from the way they do movies today, where they go in without a completed script and they realize they've painted themselves into a corner. They have no idea how to end the movie, and someone says, "Oh, just push the bastard down the stairs," and then everybody complains, and then you get the alternate ending with the Blu-ray.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't quite care for Alfred's direction to this, though. I did like the fact he borrowed some of my favorite things, and it's funny I say favorite from the 56 version because the 50s version because it came. And I keep getting the dates wrong. I do apologize, folks. It's been a long day. But I am glad he pulled some things from the original to bring it to the 56 because they're my favorite moments in both. Like one of the big things with the assassin is timing his shot so no one hears. So it involves a music cue that's going to happen at the concert, and the scene's almost word for word. It is word for word exactly in both films, where the coordinating villain, if you will, the head villain, talks to the assassin of when he should take the shot. And I love that because he kept the one line in there about you'll take the shot at the cymbal crash, so no one would know. And I'm sure the composer will probably appreciate
Yeah, I noticed that they kept that the same.
They kept that dialogue the same. And then the climactic moment when the assassination's supposed to happen, and it being Britain, they actually film it in the same place. So it's really weird watching these two films back to back.
Yeah. So, well, it's in the Royal Albert Hall. Hitchcock has a thing for landmarks, which Royal Albert Hall certainly is one. And now this is my first time. I'd seen the 56 version a few times before. This is probably like my fifth or sixth time seeing it and all. I had never had the opportunity to see the 34 version until just a couple days ago. And but I had seen that sequence in the 34 version because when you're in college and you're taking all these film studies courses and everything like that, that is one of the pieces of filmmaking they show you to demonstrate the power of montage and editing.
Yes.
As because that scene was so legendary. So he needed to have that thing, but he also needed to like up the ante. So I dare say that in the 56 version, he did actually up the ante, and it does play more suspenseful in the remake as he tries to basically. These two versions are a good example of how you can take the same plot, same director, same genre, and make things completely different in a lot of ways. But in the 56 version, I think that it was one where he knew that I have to reference this, and I'm going to be under tremendous pressure to top myself.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the one moment where he says this is him trying to top himself. And I think he succeeds, actually. Just barely, but I think he does succeed. Because I think that it's a lot more, I think, all the leading up to it, going from door to door. And I think that the actual scream and everything, I think is a bit more suspenseful in the remake in this particular sequence.
It is actually in a number of sections in the 50s version. Suspense is at least a little bit better, and I think I read a quote somewhere in one of the trivia bits or whatever where Alfred said that the difference between the two films shows you like the first one was a film being done by an amateur and the second one was being done by a professional. In a way, because he did hone his craft. And I read that scene in the 50s version had like 124 cuts.
Oh yeah, it was
wow.
It was a big deal, and he'd wanted to do that for a couple of his films. He wanted to do that for a couple of his films where he wanted to remake films that he had done before, even if they were successful, to see if to have a better go at them. One of the big ones that he wanted to remake was The Lodger.
Oh, okay.
Which was one he did I think I want to say 27, 29, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't actually remake it. Other people did. Actually, a couple of times, but Hitchcock did not get a chance to revisit that one, but he always did want to revisit The Lodger. Mm-hmm. And but this is he was very conscious of, okay, that was good, but if I knew then what I know now, I would have handled it differently. I'd love to have another crack at it, and this is him doing that. So
yeah, and he does it well with especially jumping between all the different scenes and the cymbal crash, which the film opens with the cymbal crash with the most nervous percussionist ever on film. That poor guy in the opening, you watch him, he's like, shit, I better get this right.
More nervous than a Spinal Tap drummer.
He was, because in that opening you look at it, and it's a different percussionist in the film than in the opening, but you can tell the guy in the opening, he's like, God, I better get this cue right, because they're gonna have to reset up the camera. But you still get that thing where we go back to the cymbals at least 3 times in the 50s version of this assassination attempt, and he still took some key scenes. But yeah, his buildup of tension in the 50s version was done better and handled better than in the 30s version. Both are actually very interestingly shot scenes, though. Still, I like the way both of them play out, but you can definitely feel that yeah, this is me tweaking and pulling a George Lucas going, I could do better. And he actually does in this case.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Plus, it's an early meta reference because in the 50s version, we get Bernard Herrmann playing at Albert Hall. Bernard Herrmann did the music for The Man Who Knew Too Much. So it was like, wow, a little meta going on here. But yeah, I like how that whole thing played out. And I actually liked in the 50s version the assassin falling and dying there versus the other guy getting away, because though it does kind of travel back to a theme we've found in all these Hitchcock films so far. He doesn't have a great opinion of the cops, and in both the 30s version and the 50s version, they still aren't great. Are they, Scott?
No, they have to show them as being rather ineffectual, because you have to give them a reason to you have to give some kind of unspoken answer to the audience that is constantly saying, "Oh my God, why don't they just go to the police?"
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
Yeah.
they'll hurt the kid. Like, but still, they could probably do it. Why can't they go? No, they're the police and everywhere else. They're compromised. The bad guys have spies everywhere, and the police are ineffectual and, in fact, kind of incompetent. So,
especially the 34 version, because the cops, folks, they're getting to this big shootout with the bad guys who still have the son and father kidnapped. So Peter Lorre and his gang are shooting at the cops. The cops are dropping. I mean, these guys, they try to rush the building and just get annihilated. So then they take cover. And while this is going on, the cops are eating crumpets and drinking tea.
So that particular stereotype apparently was adapted over the pond there.
In the 30s version, and so then we get to the 50s version, and yeah, the cops don't do anything even when they call them and say, "Look," because they get this in both. There's a church involved, and here in the 50s version, they're like, they have my kid inside, my husband's inside, and the cops are like, "Yeah, well, we're gonna need a warrant. I don't see anything outside. You know what? We're just going to leave, and we'll leave one guy here. And when Scotland Yard shows up, maybe they'll be able to do something. I don't know."
Oh, man.
But it's similar. They're not eating tea and crumpets, but they're still like totally just blow off this couple constantly. And yeah, being ineffectual, even in preventing an assassination. It's just... it's just this running theme. Alfred just does not like cops. At least it seems that way. Although Rear Window was a little bit better, but still, you're right. It is that motivation of convincing the audience why these people have to do it themselves versus leaving it to the authorities. And that is still seems to be a running theme in all the films that we've picked so far. So, is there anything that you wanted to talk about, Scott?
Well, I kind of wanted to talk about the fact that in both movies, you expect the conclusion to come when, and again, it's the spoiler room, folks, so we're talking about endings and stuff. You expect the film to end when they foil the assassination attempt on the ambassador or whatever, or the diplomat, and they don't. And I will say this. I will say that this is one that I thought the 34 version handled better. After that, because I think that was probably the climax of the 56 version. And in the 34 version, there is instead this great shootout that was inspired by an actual event.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was Okay, now I have to remember what they were called.
Oh, that's okay.
Called. My God, what was it? The Sydney Street shootings, something like that. I want to say. Um, oh man, I'm gonna totally botch that there, I'm sure. But it was yeah, it's the Sydney Street Siege. Sydney Street Siege, that's what I'm trying to think of. And it was this it was like these Latvian criminals who had tried to rob a bank, and they had gotten holed up, and they shot all these police, and it was like a big deal, and it was something that Hitchcock remembered from his youth. And they did this thing, and I will say that was one of the main differences is that in the 56 version we have the music of Bernard Herrmann. In the 34 version we have the music of no one.
Yeah,
like John
right.
Cage maybe, I don't know, but but no one basically. Because I mean, it was a very early talkie, and I don't think that a lot of filmmakers had realized that, oh right, we don't have to abandon music, we can still use it to help tell the story. Because lots of the films like back then were like that. So there's no music or anything, and this is one of the only moments where I think that was actually a good fit, because they're holed up in this hotel, and there's just this shootout between the criminals and the police, and they're just constantly refilling ammo, and there's all these stray bullets hitting inside, and they're like starting like just pick off the bad guys one by one, all these stray bullets, and like a bullet will just come and like crash into something like just inches away from someone's head, and it was a very tense scene, because we really don't care about the bad guys. But in the same building, we have our hero and his daughter who are trying to stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that was intense, because like, God, they're going to wind up hitting these guys because, no one's careful with guns to this day. I mean, we hear tragic stories every day about innocent bystanders getting hit by there's just all this gun, and it's very realistically done with us just like all these things just being doors and walls and windows and everything just being shot up. And it was a very intense sequence, I thought. What did you think of the way they handled the action in that? I know that we're primarily focused on the remake, but
no,
I mean, that seemed like a major. It was a really impressive thing. What did you think about that whole sequence, the shootout sequence?
Especially for the time period that it was made, it was impressive over the length that they did it and how it was handled. I really enjoyed the sequence of the shootout. It surprised me, actually, to have a sequence like this and that it wasn't resolved, because I thought, like some of the films of those earlier films, okay, this isn't going to go on that long. This shootout goes on for quite a bit of time, film wise. And yeah, I loved it. You mostly had the sound of the bullets. There was the peril for the dad and daughter, just like you said. I thought it was directed well, giving you insight to everybody's, where they're at. You've got the mom even having to duck while she's with the cops because stray bullets are flying into the place where they thought they were safe. The dad uses a bunch of bullets that nearly kill him to help break out of the place he was locked up in, the room he was locked up in. But yeah, he does an excellent job, even in this early film, of maintaining that feeling of danger throughout this entire sequence. You're not quite sure who's going to get hit at this point, which was amazing for other films that you had of this time. I thought he handled it great, and it is a great sequence, and it really separates itself from the 50s version and how they ended that one. And you're right with the difference of kind of playing to the larger, more mass audience. The ending of the 50s version is definitely more of a Hollywood type approach to an ending versus the 30s version, which is a little bit more abrupt, like a lot of those older films. Like, I always love that, how some of those older films, they just end. It's like, oh, hey, okay, yep, we're all good. Okay, boom, done.
everybody's fine. It's like, it's like, I mean, you're not going to see much of that outside of a canon movie from the 80s.
Yeah. Freeze frame.
It's like,
Freeze frame
it's like, of course the movie's over. Everybody else is dead.
And you get that in this one where they just, okay, they're hugged, they're embraced. You don't even see any more aftermath after that. It's just boom, credits. Like, oh, okay. That's how we're going to end that. Fine. And it ends on a happy note, but it is kind of a tragic happy note because the dad's shot and everybody's like, holy crap. And then you get the 50s version, which ends on a joke.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, okay, night and day there.
It was meant to I think the and like you said, it very one's much longer than the other. The Man Who Knew Too Much 34 version clocks in at like 76 minutes.
Yeah.
It's short. It's very short. And it's, I think it was just meant to give you just like this adrenaline thrill ride, which, by and large it does.
For back then, especially the shootout.
Yeah. And the 56 version, I think, was meant to be a big motion picture event where it was meant to give the audience everything they wanted and make them feel. It wasn't like a little jolt. It was meant to feel like a complete meal, and that's what this was. I think.
Yeah, that's a good description between both of them. Though it is also evident with the 34 version that he was using actors and actresses who were used to doing silent film. Which wasn't a bad thing. It's just the way they acted. Some of their physical movements were very dramatic, for Edna Best. And that's not a bad thing, but it is the difference between them that 34 version just kind of hits on all the points that he wanted to hit. You just go right from here, here, here. And 56, they wanted to give you a little more bang for your buck. So they gave you a little bit more Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day.
I'll tell you one thing that they do that the 56 version does much better, and it is when they find out almost. In fact, I want to almost say that. Does she find out beforehand in the original? If I'm trying to think back now, but how the wife deals with the kidnapping of their child.
Oh,
I think that is handled much better in the 56 version, where Dr. McKenna there has to agonize over this. He basically gaslights her into thinking that she's you've been talking a mile a minute and you need to have some sedatives to calm down, and he's doing these awful things because he knows that this is the news that every mother dreads hearing. And that she and just the raw emotional thing, where she's angry at him and she's terrified and saddened for her child. I think that was handled much better in the 56 version than the 34.
It was. You're right. That sequence, I enjoyed how he did that. Like, well, here, just take this. Just it'll make you feel. No, look, I'll tell you, but you got to take the pills first. Like, whoa, okay. But then you realize, it was handled better because in the original, she did kind of a silent movie move of being, shocked, and then she passes out, and then that's it. And in this one, not only is Doris Joe sedated, but even the sedation doesn't work that well. And then even when she comes out of the sedation, she's just like broke. I mean, she's just like in zombie land, like just like trying to comprehend this. It's actually a great. It shows you what happens when you get two great actors together. Because that scene after she wakes up or not, and her husband's packing the bags as he's keeping an eye through that great shot where he's keeping an eye on her through the mirror, through the doorway, looking at the mirror, waiting till she gets up. But when she gets up, it's not like there's a lot of words exchanged, and it's just this feeling. It's handled a lot better. It gets you feeling for the parents a lot more than in the 30s version, which it's kind of over and okay.
It's very much down to business.
Yeah.
Now, pip pip. Keep calm and carry on. And
that is also
like,
sorry, but that's also the big difference is the 30s version is definitely British.
It's definitely British, where these people are going on, like hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way.
Well, it's dry too. The first one is so much drier than the 50s version. It's just like, wow. And I also showing you nowadays, folks, I know a lot of people have actually probably grown up now with very little portrayal of smoking in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
The 30s version, man, everybody was smoking.
Yeah, everybody smoked back then. They didn't even know it was bad for you, which is kind of strange because it's smoke,
Yeah.
But I mean, even when Mark and I were younger, there was a lot more smoking in movies. Yeah, I don't know if you ever smoked. I was a smoker actually, for a long time. So
I never got into it, mainly because my dad we used to go to the bars a lot, and the secondhand smoke used to always get me, and I was like, I never had the urge to actually smoke because that was just awful.
Terrible habit. Don't pick it up.
Yeah,
but I did. Kid. But at one point I did, and I kept it up for a long time. So, but these days,
glad you quit. So
yeah, so am I. But these days there's hardly any in the movies because you go to bars, no one smokes. You go to restaurants, no one smokes. It's actually kind of nice.
It is. It's not. I'm not complaining. It's just funny that. Because you don't realize that transition, though, that it's moved out. When you do see it, it's very evident. And watching the 34 version, I mean, these guys get done skiing, they get up, and as they're walking to wherever they need to go, they light up, both of them.
Yeah.
She lights up. Everybody. I mean, it's just.
I don't know why I was out of breath at the bottom of that hill. Only smoked half a pack of unfilters and then went skiing down a mountain in sub-zero temperatures.
So that's one thing that was kind of noticeable. I found was interesting for culture wise. Now it's food everybody eats. So there you go. Because you got to have people doing something while you're talking.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, we just all like stuff our faces and let's just get fat.
Yeah. Okay. I love food too much. It's been the holidays, so. But I think we'll wrap it up here with The Man Who Knew Too Much. I guess we'll end it tonight with asking you, Scotty, which would you recommend people watch? Or which one would you have them both? Or if you want them to watch both, which one first? So let's put it that way.
I watched the original first this time, although I'd seen the remake many times before, and that's how I would recommend doing it because it makes this original one look like this. Wow, this is kind of really interesting how they approach this everything, and then you see kind of this very bloated remake that takes the basic ideas of the original and goes off in its own direction. I think that if you can watch the original first, that would be better because you can see how things kind of expand upon it and on the themes and everything. And it's a really they are each examples about how there is so much room to play around in storytelling, because this is the same story. It's the same director, but each film is completely different. It has a completely different mood to it. So I would recommend the original first.
And I would have to agree. After watching them in reverse order, I would say to probably appreciate each one of them more if you've never seen them before. you watch the 30s version and then the 50s version, because not only are, as Scotty said, they're completely different films, but if you want to try to get an understanding of how Alfred Hitchcock grew in his filmmaking and building suspense in that, you see it in this. And you don't, and please, folks, don't tell me, well, George Lucas did it with special editions. Fuck the special editions. Anyway,
No.
This is not a special, Alfred Hitchcock coming back and doing a special edition of The Man Who Knew Too Much. He's doing a completely reboot, basically, as we said, a remake of it, and trying to do it in a different way. And you actually don't get a huge amount of chances in cinema, I don't think, where you get a director who's able to take almost the exact same film and remake it to kind of the way he was hoping to do with the original. So you don't get many chances like this in cinema to actually have such an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, he's there's no repeat. Even when we say that he's doing this, it does the same Royal Albert Hall sequence and everything. There is no repeating. He does not repeat himself at all. So he's that's what an artist does. Is an artist finds new ways to approach the storytelling.
Right. And in this one, you can see, just watch them in order. You'll see what we're saying. And you won't feel like you just watched the same movie over again. You'll notice the similarities and the themes in that, but they are both two films. And it's unique. Would you say, Scotty? I mean, you watch a hell of a lot more films than I do. Would you say, though, it's kind of a unique opportunity to see something like this with a director?
It's very rare, and it's rare that you'll see this handled with such maturity.
Right.
Because with a lot of other directors, they will either stick too close to what came before, or they will let the task of revisiting old territory kind of loom over them too much. So it's rare to see this attempted. It's even rarer to see it done successfully. And this is one of the rare instances where you do get to see it done successfully.
Totally agree on that. So there you have it, folks. Hope you've been enjoying our 8 weeks of Hitchcock. We got 4 more Hitchcockian episodes to do, so we appreciate every single one of you listening. And Scotty D, I know it's been a long time since you updated, but you do have stuff out there, and please, License to Shill, sir, go ahead and tell folks where they still can find your material out there.
Well, if you want to do some digging, you can find my writings at movieocrity.com. And you can catch episodes of my web series Movieocrity at vimeo.com/channels/Movieocrity.
Highly recommend it, folks. He does some excellent breakdowns of films, far better than I could ever attempt, and some great some great analysis of films that you do not expect someone to do great analyses of.
And I could say the same. And I could say the same thing for Mark the Movieman here. So
well, thank you. So appreciate you, folks. Thank you, Scott, for your time. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. And we'll just say good evening.
Good evening.
Or maybe we should go. We'll just say good night.
Have a good evening. You know what? Have a nightcap. Have a little nightcap with your tank. Make sure it's something that'll just like smash the hell out of you, so you just don't even want to wake up in the morning.
Put a little hair on your chest.
If you can't see a 6-foot rabbit after your nightcap, well, I don't think you're doing it right. I think you need to give it another go.
Wait, you've seen the rabbit too?
Oh, the rabbit, yeah.
Mary,
he's bartending. He's bartending.
Oh, well, you better pour us a shot. Oh, God. Hey, all my friends out there looking for more Spoiler Room goodness? Then why don't you check out our brand new Patreon page, patreon.com/specialmarkproductions, where you can get access to exclusive Spoiler Room episodes and a whole lot more. You can also find us on Facebook groups at SMPRD and on to Twitter at SpecialMarkPro. Let your voice be heard and let us know what you would like to see in the spoiler room, as well as just how we're doing in general. We appreciate your support, and remember, in the spoiler room, the conversation is fresh, but we do spoil the movies.